I don't have a CNC, I don't have a laser cutter, and I don't have a scroll saw, but I do have lots of other tools, and I really want to have a go at making my own workshop sign so that I can be like all of the real YouTubers. I have some offcuts of 6mm MRMDF that I can use to get started. I also have some printouts of the logo, which I printed out upscaled to be 450mm in diameter. I just printed it out on some A4 sheets as that's the biggest my printer can handle, and I just need to cut away some borders and then glue it all in place. I'm going to make the sign in 3 layers for an embossed effect, which should look quite cool, and I'll be adding some lights later too. Here I'm cutting out what will be the middle layer first at the bandsaw, and I ended up running out of cut capacity, so I finished up with the jigsaw. To get the most out of these pieces of MDF, which weren't quite big enough to give me a sign the size that I wanted, I'm now transferring the circle shape to what will be the bottom layer of the sign. And I can get that cut out too. The glue wasn't yet dry, so I could just peel off the paper and stick it down to some more offcuts, and then I can start cutting out the letters, which will be the top layer of the sign. And here's where it gets tricky. The bandsaw isn't really the ideal tool for cutting small letters like this, as you really want to keep your fingers a safe distance from the blade. It's not so bad with the larger letters like these ones here, but I'm going to need another solution for the smaller letters that I'll be cutting later. A scroll saw would be a safer option for this kind of work, but I don't have one. So onto the smaller letters now, and I'm going to make a zero clearance surface to give me more support while cutting. I can remove the bulk of the material with the bandsaw. This is going to speed up the process, but I'm going to avoid getting my fingers closer to the blade than I am comfortable with. Some of the letters will need some material removed inside, so I drilled some holes, and I'm going to be using my coping saw as it has a blade that can be easily removed and reattached. And to clean up my wonky cuts, I use a combination of a flat file and a few round files to give me the contours that I need. I also used chisels for some of the shaping. I set up my belt sander so that I can smooth over the outside edges. And then I'm using some shellac to seal up the edges on the letters, which I chose for its fast drying time, enabling me to get some primer and paint on. And if you're wondering why it has a black tint, it's because I had previously used this same paintbrush with India ink, which I'd completely forgotten about, but it's not going to matter as this is all going to get painted anyway. I've got some acrylic primer which I can apply to the larger pieces and the faces of the letters too. And once everything is dry, I denibbed with 400 grit. Spray paint would have been ideal for painting all these small letters, but I didn't have any in the cupboard, so I'm using what I have. The middle layer is going to get a couple of coats of my hand mixed green paint, which I've used on so many things in the workshop already. And then the letters get a top coat or two of white satin paint. Time to put everything together now, and I'm going to use hot glue for that because it dries almost instantly, so I can get it all put together really quickly. I needed to do some careful measuring and masking because I wanted everything to be positioned right by eye, as close to my original logo design as possible. I'm not finished with the text yet though. The next letters that I need to add are way too small for me to cut at the bandsaw, so I'll need to figure that out shortly. I'm using another scrap of 6mm MDF here just to flush up the surface of the back panel. And once the glue is dry, I cut away the excess using the bandsaw and a flush trim bit in the router. Right, now for the trickiest part, those small letters. I put a layer of masking tape down first and then added my paper template on top, and I'm going to use a knife to carve out the letters as best I can, cutting through both the paper and the tape beneath. Then I just need to peel away the letters. I accidentally damaged some of the MDF here, but it's not going to be a problem. I'd seen a trick somewhere where if you want the best results when using masking tape for a nice crisp finish, you should use the base layer of paint first before the top layer. So that's what I'm trying here. This should prevent any paint bleeding through, but I've never tried it before, so I'm hoping this will work. With that dry, I can then add 2 coats of the top layer and wait for that to dry too, before peeling away the tape, and I have to say I was pretty pleased with the results. Not perfect, but definitely better than I had expected. And after a few touch-ups with a small artist's paintbrush, it looked pretty good. This sign will only ever be viewed from a distance anyway, so it really doesn't need to be perfect. I said earlier that the sign was in 3 layers, and that's not strictly true because here I am grabbing a small piece of 24mm thick MDF, which is going to allow me to do 2 things. I'm going to be adding it to the back to space the sign away from the wall, which will create a nice shadow line. And it's going to create space for me to add some of these LED lights. I'm tacking them in place with some hot glue, and it's important to do this before the glue gun gets too hot, so basically as soon as it's hot enough to leave the gun, but well before it's reached maximum temperature, as I don't want it to damage the lights. At the moment I can just rub it in with my finger without burning myself. This piece then gets glued to the back of the sign, and I'm going to be adding a keyhole plate so that I can hang it on the wall. I cut a recess for this. I've got this space behind my table saw where I want the sign to be, and to get the electrics hidden from view, I'm using a small piece of stick-on trunking. It's not worth chasing out the wall of my workshop just to hide a tiny length of cable, so this will be fine. That was a fun little project, and now I won't forget the name of my YouTube channel. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.